Penn State, Notre Dame, Orange Bowl, Thursday night. Is this the same team? Like, are these two the exact same team? Because both Penn State and Notre Dame, they want to run the football, and both of them have kind of a two-headed monster that they can do it with. Obviously, Penn State with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, and Notre Dame with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Both have won so many games with elite defenses. Obviously, Notre Dame, it's a little bit more difficult now that they're without their leading sacker, Riley Mills, but it didn't seem to be much of an issue against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. I think both receiving cores are pretty comparable. I probably give the edge with just pure wide receivers to Notre Dame with Jordan Faison, Bo Collins, and Jaden Greathouse. But Penn State probably has just the pure overall pass catcher in Tyler Warren. Both have quarterbacks that can do really great things, but also you have a little bit of trust issues with. So overall, Adam, I keep asking myself, I think Notre Dame and Penn State are the exact same team. It just comes down to which does what they do best better.
This is really a matchup of two teams who play the same style on offense, the same style on defense. Their programs are built similar ways. Their head coaches have similar coaching styles. They take risk at a similar amount. I think the biggest difference is the two quarterbacks. I think Drew Allar plays a different style of play than Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard should probably run the ball 15 times in this game, 20 times in this game if it gets really close. So where Drew Allar is more of that pocket passer, stands in the pocket, delivers the ball down the field. But I think this matchup creates everything to be an instant classic. I mean, I think this is a very, very tight game. I mean, I think Vegas has it at like a point or a half-point spread right now, and I think that's right. The one area, as I was digging into some of the stats and looking at some of the data on the game, I think everyone's been on the same page that Penn State has gotten much better on offense since the Ohio State game, and they're playing at a really high level since that loss to Ohio State, 6 weeks ago. The biggest change Penn State had since that game is they changed and upped their usage of 12 personnel, two tight ends, from about 35% before Ohio State to now 60% of plays they are running two tight end, 12 personnel sets. That's a huge difference late in the season. I think that high percentage of 12 personnel is very indicative of what the priorities are for Penn State's coaching staff since the Ohio State game. Penn State is much closer to a championship team with an extra tight end in the game instead of a receiver because the backs are so dominant. Drew Allar can be used somewhat in the run game at that point, and then Penn State gains the extra hat in the run game, and it's worth the sacrifice in the pass game vertically down the field. But you also have other tight ends, and I think a couple key players in this game are Luke Reynolds, Khalil Dinkins, two of the backup tight ends, but they're really not backups because they play so much that play alongside Tyler Warren that will see a ton of time in this game. So that will be a major chess match. How does Notre Dame fit some of those 12 personnel groupings that Penn State has, and overall, how does Notre Dame call their sets against that heavier personnel? Notre Dame, on the other hand, I saw this stat. Notre Dame was the bottom 5 in FBS football in seeing 12 personnel against them on offense. So no one went up against Notre Dame running 12 personnel because no one thought that getting in heavy sets and running the football was actually feasible against Notre Dame's defense. But Penn State's going to. And Penn State's the first team who can do it, and I have a feeling it's going to prove wonders in this game and be the reason Penn State wins.
To that end, I was having a conversation this morning with Mike Golick Jr., longtime buddy and obviously Notre Dame alum, and I asked him, I said, what scares you the most in this game? And he said, man, if Penn State commits to truly running the football, when you think about where the only real crack in the armor for Notre Dame defensively right now is the depth on the defensive line, right? So over the course of the game, and this is why I love what you just said, Adam, about how evenly matched these two teams are. This game to me is like sometimes styles make fights, and we know that. This is not a style make fights game. This is an execution game because these two teams are so common and similar in the way that they do things. It's really going to be who can execute what the most. So in my mind, if we see the version of Penn State that we saw, for example, in the Big Ten championship game against Oregon, that was just coming out of every set, they were saying, hey, how do we run the football just right at this line? I think that that's probably the path here for Notre Dame that Notre Dame should be concerned about, I should say, because in my mind, if Penn State can come out and just absolutely hammer this line early in the game, it won't matter. Early in the game, we're going to see a lot of why are they running the football? It's not working. It will break its way through in the third quarter against a defensive line that the depth is going to be tested on. So I think patience, keeping this game, like a knockout fight, keeping it close and letting it be ugly for 3 quarters actually really plays to the advantage of Penn State in this football game moving forward. And then the other part of this, Caroline, that I think we have to really factor in is that Riley Leonard has been very good, but you can make Notre Dame's offense one-dimensional. We talked about last week, like the teams that lose are the teams that become one-dimensional. Notre Dame was one-dimensional throwing the football. Drew Allar throws the football a lot better than Riley Leonard could ever imagine. So there are going to be opportunities out of play action that Drew Allar can take advantage of that I'm not sure Notre Dame's offense has the same in their depth in their offense. That's what starts to make me lean. My pick before all of this was Notre Dame, but this feels like a flip of the coin. And right now, I'm not sure that we shouldn't trust Drew Allar more than we trust Riley Leonard in this football game to make 2 or 3 plays.
Important to point out, too, though, that even if Notre Dame is one-dimensional, they can still beat the SEC champion Georgia Bulldogs in the college football playoff. Because Riley Leonard threw for 90 yards against Georgia, and it didn't matter. It was one of his best rushing days on the season. And, Notre Dame as a whole was running the football very well, even with kind of a not 100% Jeremiah Love, and they were still able to win the football game. And I think that's going to be a big key here against Penn State, and that is forcing turnovers. That Notre Dame is one of the best teams in the country at forcing turnovers. That was a huge momentum shift against Georgia when they knocked the ball out at the Georgia 13. And that was the only offensive scoring drive for Notre Dame on the entire day in the Sugar Bowl was the turnover right before half. It was 1 play, 13 yards, 7 points. And before you know it, you blink an eye and Notre Dame has kind of put the game on ice. They did it against Indiana. The Curtis Rourke early interception that was followed up by the 98-yard Jeremiah Love touchdown run. That, when Notre Dame forces turnovers, you're not asking Riley Leonard to do too much with his arm. That's the sweet spot for Notre Dame. Obviously, incredibly difficult to predict turnovers, but that's a massive key, I think, for Notre Dame is forcing turnovers against a Penn State team that doesn't cough up the football very much.
2 of the key guys in this game for Notre Dame are Xavier Watts and Leonard Moore. They're 2 of the guys in their secondary. That secondary is the X factor in this one. Moore is the freshman corner, Watts the senior safety. To beat Penn State, like you said, Caroline, Notre Dame will have to force at least 1 turnover. I don't see a world where Notre Dame can win this game without at least 1 takeaway. And that's likely going to come from the secondary. You got Watts, who has multiple interceptions this season and a fumble recovery in the last couple games. Realistically, Penn State matches up really well in the box, and the secondary is going to have to be the tacklers. Can this Notre Dame secondary continue their stretch of great tackling in their previous few games? That's a very underrated question in this game. You got Schuler, their safety, who's going to be the guy matched up against Tyler Warren, and that will then allow Xavier Watts to kind of roam around and play center field, get into the box, and make some tackles. You got Jordan Clark, their transfer nickel from Arizona State. He's a scrappy nickel that's going to have to play in the box and make tackles in open space against Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. There's going to be multiple rushes in this game where Katron Allen and Nick Singleton get to the second level, and then it's going to force the Irish secondary to make the tackle to prevent a 6-yard run from turning into a 16-yard run, a 4-yard run getting into a 60-yard run. So, Watts and Moore have double-digit tackles in the last couple of games. Those are going to be 2 big players for Notre Dame. They're going to have to step up in the secondary Fits.
And they have, by the way, I think you're talking about a strength for the secondary as opposed to, like, you hear secondary tackling. That's not always something that makes people comfortable. Yeah. Notre Dame defense has done that well. But I also think, conversely, the other thing that this Notre Dame defense does, back end of the defense particularly, closes well. So the closing speed is they reduce windows. So Drew Allar is going to have to do a really smart job of throwing guys open, right? Like Drew Allar is going to have to anticipate throws. If he's late on throws, you will pay for him. We saw that in the Georgia game. Like so often we hear the difference between college football quarterbacks and NFL quarterbacks. There's a difference between throwing to a guy that's open and throwing a guy open. That's much different. Anticipation on throws for Drew Allar is going to have to be lights out. But conversely, I went back and started watching some of the Penn State plays throughout the course of the year. Drew Allar's done a much better job of that than I give him credit for here. So I think this also, what creative wrinkle are we going to see from a Penn State offense that we expect creative wrinkles from? That's part of why they made a change at offensive coordinator. We talk about it all the time. There is some level of creativity that comes here too. So I think that there's opportunities, for Penn State to be able to open some of that up against the secondary that's going to have to play close to the line of scrimmage to just continually try and tackle guys.
Yeah.
And it's that balance of creativity, not being predictable, maybe what we saw from Penn State against Ohio State, but also not getting cute with it. We saw a little getting cute with it against Boise State. And it's just bow up and run the football. Like, you do not have to, throw in any of these like gadget plays or get overly cute with it. It's being consistent with what you do best, but also not being predictable.